Welcome to this podcast is making me thirsty, the number one destination for Seinfeld fans. This is episode 149. Today's guest is a two-time Emmy Award winning television producer who has worked on such hits as Boston Common, Two Broke Girls, Will and Grace, and of course, he was a producer on Seinfeld for the entire run of the series. Please welcome Tim Kaiser. Tim, thanks for joining.
Happy to be here. Tim, such an honor. Thanks for joining us. So, take us back. Kid from Oakmont, PA, 26 years old, lands on the set of Seinfeld in 1989, 1990. How'd that come about? You know, my wife and I decided if we're going to do it, let's do it. And if we're going to try the big time. And we literally packed up our cat in a beat-up Honda and decided to head to LA. And very overwhelming at first, but someone you know very well, Tom Sharonis, was a mentor of mine. So I started working on a Mary Tyler Moore comeback series with him. And we finished that the first year. And then he gets the call for Seinfeld and gave me a ring and said, "Are you up for it?" And I said, I literally that day took another job, Uncle Buck, with the spinoff from the John Candy movie with Universal. Yeah. And he said, "Well, just meet Larry and Jerry. Just meet them, and maybe that'll change your mind." So I went down, and they're pitching me on doing the show, and suddenly they break into an argument, and they fight for like 20 minutes in front of me. Like, and I say that lovingly. and I got to just sit there and watch this back and forth. And it was like a show about nothing, literally that argument. And I thought, this is genius. And called Universal and said, "I'm out," and told Tom I was in.
Wow. And that's incredible. And then so you're hired at that point as, what would be the title? I guess associate producer or coordinating producer?
Yeah.
Could you maybe walk our audience through, especially in the early years, just kind of what that day to day entails? Like, I'm assuming your hands are in all sorts of things, right? From, I don't know, casting, research, script stuff. I mean, just kind of on a kind of regular daily basis. Like, what was your role as far as what were you kind of most hands on in? If you don't mind, kind of walking us through that.
Early on, it was very heavy post production. So I was in charge of editing. I was in charge of color timing the picture, coloring the picture, buying the film, even sound effects, laugh tracks. All the interstitial stock shots you see, all the stuff that you see, all the New York footage that was shot. I coordinate crews in New York, and we'd need Kramer jumping off a building, and I'd need a lookalike with a wig. We shot every single bit of that New York stuff without a permit. I guess I'm allowed to say that now. I stole all of it, and we just ran by the seat of our pants. It would be Friday, here's the script, and we're shooting in a few days. And we were scrambling, which made it part of the fun. It was very challenging. Nothing like I've ever had since. And I've done probably 600 half hours of prime time. But primarily, you'd be on the set, not so much for the rehearsals, but taking notes for laughs. Much of what we shot was without an audience, either on the New York street or once we excused the audience, and Larry was a perfectionist, so we'd go back in and shoot hours sometimes after the audience left, and there was no audience. So you heard what they reacted to earlier. So I'd take little notes and have little laughs, my little laugh notations, and then sit in a mixing studio because I mixed the show. And I'd mix it, and then Larry and Jerry would drive in and sit down and watch it. And here you have the best comedian in the world, and probably the funniest man in the world, Larry, like hanging on every single line. So it was a painstaking process to get it just right. To where my goal was, they come in, they watch it, it's been cut flawlessly, and all the right sound effects were in, and the laughs were in just the right spots. And to have them maybe stop it once or twice and say, can we delay that laugh, or can we make that a little louder, or didn't the audience respond a little louder that night? And I was like, well, they did, but we didn't use that take. Let me hear the first one, and a lot of that stuff. So a home run for me in the mixing room would be for them to watch the whole thing, laugh, and say, this is great, and leave.
So you mentioned Larry and Jerry. Just going back to the whole prior, like, what do you know about these guys? I know Sharonis, obviously, you made an impact on him. Obviously, doing research on you, we know you kind of grew up with Mr. Rogers, right? I know your father ran WQED over in Pittsburgh. That he must have made a great impact on you. But what was the interview like? When you met these two guys, they never did a show before, right? They're not sitcom guys. And I guess that's why they brought Sharonis in to kind of bring some stability there. But obviously, you mentioned they like right away. You're like you quit the other job. Like something was right with these guys. But a 26-year-old, what are Larry and Jerry asking you that first time you met them?
It's interesting. Fred Barron was the executive producer at that time for just that second pilot, first episode, and he brought in his buddy Tom, who didn't have years and years and years of sitcom experience even at that point, who then he called me. So it was this chain reaction. But you're right, Larry and Jerry didn't know really anything about it, nothing. So they had nothing to ask me professionally other than where you're from, what you're doing, just getting a feel for me as a person. But very quickly, it deteriorated in a great way into, don't tell them that, it's this, and this whole argument. So most of the interview was an argument, a fabulous argument.
Yeah, we've heard a couple of job interviews with Jerry and Larry now on the podcast, and it sounds like it was kind of just that, especially early on. They just wanted to make sure it was a good fit, right? Personality wise, can we work with this guy? Does he get us? That sort of thing, rather than can you show me the technicalities of whatever the job entailed. So that's great to hear that they were kind of just like you said, flying by the seat of their pants. It also sounds like, and we've heard this too, just from interviews with Jerry and things, throughout the years, that they really did have their hand on everything, huh? Like they're looking through that video that you're showing them of that take, and they're checking every detail. Like that's also interesting to hear, because you do hear that, but you never. I mean, you were there with them as they painstakingly, like you said, went through everything. So, that's really interesting. Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of that early on stuff, especially you're kind of behind the scenes, right? But I'm guessing you were, as a producer, you're involved in all of that sort of stuff, right? Researching things, maybe even involved in casting or contractual stuff. We had heard stories about when Titleist was had to be used for the marine biologist. You were kind of involved in that. Anything else like that, or maybe even that story where like you're kind of like put in this position, as you mentioned, of like, hey, this is the show, we have the script, everything shot, like we need to have this and this in place, like this quickly. How many? What kind of stories from that can you kind of share with us that we would kind of think are interesting and funny?
Well, that you mentioned Titleist. I'm a golfer, so it's like if he's pulling anything out of the blowhole, it's got to be a Titleist. It's the best golf ball there is. And they caught wind of it, and then I think they sent us 200 dozen Seinfeld logoed golf balls, of which I think I still have a dozen up in the attic somewhere. But stuff like that. And when Kramer smoked cigars, he wanted them to be Macanudos. They're mild. There were Cubans in the show, and they find out and send just boxes to fill a room full of cigars and whatnot. But some of the background to some of this stuff it's and I'm not going to remember the name, but like the show with Desperado, with Elaine and the Eagles song. Jerry came in and said, we've got to clear a Desperado. Well, even a young 26-year-old at that point, I realized, well, it wasn't 26, this was a later episode, but I realized Eagles never clear anything. They've never licensed to a TV show or a movie ever. How am I going to do this? So I thought, I got to get Irving Azoff, the biggest music agent producer in the world, on the phone. Good luck with that. And try to convince him to license the song. And so I worked out a thing where I negotiated, well, what if Jerry showed up at Don Henley's Boston Bash fundraiser in Boston? And they're like, he would do that? And now I'm thinking, oh, crap. Like, he's going to kill me. And so it's like, well, let's get into this. And so we got into it. Luckily, Jerry was like, sure, I'll do that. And we got the song. And it was only for like 10 seconds. We ended up using it several times for way longer than that. And it was like one of those things that just worked out beautifully. But,
wow.
There's lots of different, like, I could talk for 3 hours about
negotiating. You're like, yeah, Costanza there. So
yeah.
I always wonder that about, and I think we talked with Melman about this, the product placement. You mentioned Titleist, like a ton of products, Junior Mint, you name it. Did those all have to get licensed but not paid, if you will, as product placement? I know that didn't really exist back then.
Right, but nowadays you can't do anything. But if you do, there needs to be a firm agreement in place. Back then, it was the Wild West. We would be told you can't use the real cereal on the wall behind Jerry, and Jerry was like, "Yeah, we are." And NBC was like, "Yeah, you're the biggest show in the world. Great." And no one was getting anything. I mean, we did the space pens, right? And they sent everyone on the crew an engraved with their name on it space pen. Well, we didn't do it to get a pen.
Right.
You know what I mean? And,
right.
And Jerry didn't wear Nikes in every episode to get free Nikes. He didn't need free Nikes. So we just kind of did it. A couple times it was about to backfire. You remember the scene with Kramer and the horse? He feeds Beefarino
Yeah.
to the horse. Well, I had to reach out because it's such a prominent thing to Beefaroni, the company, and Chef Boyardee, I believe it was. And they were like, "It does what?" I said, "Well, Kramer feeds the horse your product and thus has gas and cancels the entire ride." No, our industrial can, no. It's for people. I don't think you understand. No. So I went to Larry and said, "You're not going to believe it. We got to know." And in those days, it was like any publicity is good publicity. Nope, we couldn't use it. So Larry changed it from Beefaroni to Beefarino. And then I took it to the attorneys, and they were like, "I don't know, it's close. You already asked for permission and got, no, it's close. We'll let you do it." And they were going to sue us, and obviously never did. But so some of those, if you think we're really going in deep with this company and taking liberties, you do run it past them. And most are smart enough to think that might live 30, 40 years on TV.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. It's interesting. I wanted to ask you this because you were there, pretty much at the beginning and kind of all the way through, right? So, at what point, from your perspective, did you think like it clicked, like Seinfeld clicked, right? Like that maybe not yet the ratings were there, but I guess internally, or was it there all the time and just everyone didn't catch up yet? But like, for me, I would say like the jacket, which is like episode 8, I think, or something like this, or the phone message, somewhere around there. I mean, it already clicked for me as a viewer watching it live, but internally, like, when did everyone kind of take a deep breath and be like, okay, I think we got something here. It's going to have some legs. Like, from your perspective, you can remember, like, was there a moment, or maybe it was just a season or an episode or something like that?
From my perspective, I mean, there was always some kind of genius in there from the beginning. It wasn't necessarily the whole show, but there were bits and pieces and moments of that. Everybody's saying that, everyone's done that, everyone's gone through that. The relatability factor, and I think the earlier shows were much longer. Each scene was, some of them were 2.5 minutes. And as we did the 4, and then I think we did 12, 13 second year, and then once we got into what I call season 3, I think we really started hitting our strides where we put full episodes together. Where Larry decided, we're 13 minutes over, and I don't want to cut this. It's gold. So if you'll notice the progression, you guys know it better than pretty much anybody. It went from these long, George and Jerry standing at the elevator. Well, I'm an architect. These things are 3 minutes long. You don't do that in television. So they started going like to Monks. You did that? Cut back to there. Cut back to there. You had 3 stories juggling, 3 balls in the air. And the pace started really moving, especially season 3 and on. It just was like no one else was doing it. We had exteriors and back to here, and he started telling stories in the editing room, keeping his story, but embellishing it and moving the pace of it and punctuating it in the editing rooms from where I was sitting. So
and is that Larry? I mean, pretty much were there a bunch of like, hey, we have to change this, or
it was Larry.
Yeah. I mean, because just looking at the producers, you were the one, right? You were pretty much the one from the beginning that they trusted, and obviously went through the whole run. I mean, That must be, you must be incredibly proud of that. Obviously, we talk a lot about it. There's kind of, I don't know, three sections of the show, if you will, right? The early years, Sharonis, Larry Charles, um, then the Ackerman years, and then obviously post Larry. But you were that stabilizing force. Was there? I don't want to. Were you more of a Jerry guy because of that duration, or a Larry guy, or was it kind of that tight knit small family that Jerry talks about?
I think Jerry. Well, they both wore so many hats. Jerry with the stand up, that was consuming a lot of his time until we stopped doing that. And I would say I probably dealt more with Larry day to day. Larry was involved with everything. And so stories get pitched. He'd write episodes on a legal pad overnight, an entire episode, and come in with a pad and say, "There's your show." I mean, he's genius. He's genius. And we wouldn't have to work it around, and the script supervisors and assistants would just type it up word for word. They wouldn't be like, "Larry, are you sure?" Like, no, he wrote it overnight. And then he'd go into editing, and he already had it cut in his head and would say, no, this, arrange this. And Larry, we have 7 minutes to cut. And that was probably the most grueling part for him is it's all so good, but you got to cut 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 13 minutes. I don't remember how long the longest one was, but we were up around 12 minutes long on a 20, without commercials, 24 minutes. It was insane, but we'd get there. And that helped pick up the pace of the show and how it was edited and moving it along. So, I mean, here's what I will say. I'm asked all the time, like, you work with these stars, you work with those, who are the best? There wasn't one person on that show, not one, that wasn't a pleasant, wonderful person to work with. And the cast, you think they get the big head, and we could go on and talk about other series. And I have Alec Baldwin stories if you want to discuss the dark side. But as far as that cast, fantastic. It was one purpose only, and it was to get the best funny. And there were times where the writers would be talking about what car they're going to get. Yeah, I got this and I got that. And things were successful. And Jerry came in one day and said, guys, all that'll come. Funny is funny. Make funny funny. And what's funny, make it funnier. That's all that matters. And once it's the funniest it can be, all the other things, the houses, all that stuff will follow. All the success will follow. And so Jerry his beacon was to find the funniest thing. And they changed one word. You've heard the junior mint was popcorn. No, mint's funnier. Every day is 10 hours of what's funnier, which adjective, what location, what name. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's a testament, like you said, to just back to attention to detail, and you're right. That's all they went for was the funny. No hugging. Did you, as a producer too? It sounds like you were there, like you said, in the editing room, behind the scenes. At any point were you, throwing out ideas, storylines, script ideas? Was it ever something where you felt comfortable doing it? Whether it was just, hey, they bounce an idea off you, or the writers, or something like that. Anything you remember where you kind of, either got it into the show, or you pitched something that maybe didn't make the show, but you like as far as storylines go, or things like that. Were you at all ever asked, or not even asked, just kind of given that kind of leeway to kind of bounce some ideas around?
Not ideas. Certainly not. Writers were writers, and lines were lines. What on-screen stuff fell more into my lap was head scratching of like, what do we do here? Wouldn't it be funny if Kramer was a turkey and was literally waving at a drooling Newman? And they're like, but how do we do that? And I'd step in, well, let's do it. What do you mean? Well, let's figure out how we do that back then. And it's like, let's roast a turkey, throw Kramer in front of a green screen, and I could even make his wing, hey buddy, make it work. And we do that. Or they want to go mountain climbing. It's like, in here, it looks like crap. How do we do that? Or the parking garage, like, how do we make it a real parking garage? We figure out, well, with mirrors, you double every wall with mirrors. So it's more or less that kind of stuff. This could be funnier, or this is possible. We did a lot of green screen, blue screen, a lot of car scenes back when it was just wasn't being done, and the technology was really bad. And it was, I cringe at some of the earlier stuff we did, but we did use the best technology we could. So I'd have trucks running in New York with 4 film cameras, one out the front, 2 out the side, 1 out the back, unlicensed, unpermitted, shooting film for the back plates. Then we'd go back and lay them in. Of course, there's always cars screeching to a halt and people walking in front and getting in and out of the car, and like really challenging stuff for the day. Not so much now. Obviously, you push a button and it happens, but so it is a lot of that stuff. A lot of sound effects. I realized early on, like I'd go in and do what they call prelay before the mix, and we'd lay in sound effects and what sounds good, and the Phil Rizzuto, his language and how you get it on the speakerphone, and pressing the intercom in the apartment where you futz it to where it sounds like it's coming from downstairs, like all that little stuff. Like the great example, no one knows this actually, for the Bubble Boy, when the thing breaks and when George breaks the plastic, it's like, how do we make that sound? And in this database of 1 million sounds, we don't have anything like it. So I sent the PA out to get 20 beach balls. We blew them all up, almost passed out, and we had them all over the floor. And I'd squeeze it and bring a mic down, and we pop it and realize, the pencil that's not loud enough. We need something wider. Well, we only have a letter openers. We're in there stabbing it with everything we could think of until we pieced together enough of that sound. And then the slow, the wilting of it to make that sound,
Talk about an iconic.
Incredible.
Yeah. There's a million of those.
So that was season 4. And I know Seinfeld won the Emmy for comedy series in '93. Was it season 4?
I believe so.
What's your favorite season? Do you have one?
I wouldn't say even season. You go out of different episodes. I mean, everyone loves the contest. I love the contest.
Yeah.
The boyfriend might be my favorite because it took a lot of work. Getting Keith Hernandez, doing the Zapruder film. I mean, just getting that just right. I dragged a print of the film down the hallway of the lab just so it accumulated dirt, and I sat there just scrubbing it with my shoe. And then we throw it back up, transfer it again. No, it's not beat up enough, and that kind of thing. Like, it was, spit and gum a lot of times just to pull that stuff together. And you wouldn't think so on such a big show, but the turnaround time was just so crazy that he resorted to all kind of things. So probably season 4 and 5, if I had to pick.
Yeah, hard to argue. We bounced between 3, 4, and 5 for sure. And yeah, the Hernandez episode, I always say, was kind of a launch pad for the show. It kind of just took it to another level. It was the first hour of the whole thing. And you mentioned, we won't put you on the spot on, the big 4, and you mentioned Hernandez, but this podcast, I think this show and why it's so strong is they let the guest stars shine. Like, these 4 main characters carried the show, but they kind of, you think about Jimmy, you think about the maestro, there's a lot of great secondary characters that they love, that they let shine. And those characters are forever known for Seinfeld. They've been on Matlock and everything else, but no one really remembers them from that. But any favorites, or like someone you were in awe of when you met them, whether it was a Peterman or just kind of a one-time guest star?
Well, you mentioned the maestro. I can't even remember his name now. He came to my office once, and I know him from Animal House, right? And he came in and asked a favor, like, could he miss an afternoon? Could he make it up somehow? And I'm like, sure, but you got to do one thing. Just give me a 1 pledge pin. How he did in Animal House. And I thought that might have been a career record there. And he sat on my couch, cleared his throat, and stood up and just belted out, just better than the movie.
Mark Metcalf, yeah.
We just have on.
Yeah. And that's fantastic. I mean, everyone else says out of the 4, you can put me on the spot. I mean, I've always, each one of them is endeared to me in many ways, and they're all lovely people. I always say Newman. I mean, I always loved Newman, and fantastic guy, just a champ of a guy, and he'd do anything we ask, and oftentimes it's little jabs at weight jabs and whatnot, and he was just game all the way. Terry Hatcher was fantastic. That was early on.
For you.
Yeah, well, you guys know your stuff. That's crazy.
Well, we have to ask this question to anyone that watches our podcast knows we always bring this up. And I know Chris touched on it earlier about sort of those three different, segments of the show, whether it's, after Sharonis and Larry Charles left, and then, obviously after Larry left, and we heard from you just how much his hands were on everything, right? From your perspective, just all you can give us up is your perspective, but like, what did you see after Larry left as far as, obviously Jerry had a lot on his plate. Now he's running the show by himself. Plus he's acting in it. Plus it's the number one show on TV at that point. A lot of pressure. Obviously he had some writers there helping and producers like yourself, but from your perspective, like who kind of filled Larry's shoes, if you will, or was it more than one person, or how did that delegation happen, and sort of how did you see the show after Larry's departure?
The whole thing kind of worked through a phase. I mean, I don't think you can change out an entire team and have the baseball team play the exact same way, right? So you have these players coming and going, and the brilliance of it is these two brilliant people, Larry and Jerry, and so many of the writers were stand-up comedians and not writers, and they kind of formed into writers as this went. So as people went, it was like saloon doors for a while, different seasons. Obviously, there's going to be a certain ebb and flow, and I think obviously, anybody that follows the series, it began to get a little broader, a little faster pace. You get the Kenny Rogers roaster, and things that people thought, really, and I kind of think that I enjoyed all of it. I think things certainly did change and shift. Jerry took on way more responsibility, but then again, he had years in the room with Larry. So we had we had Jeff Schaefer and Alec Berg and Dave Mandel, like really smart, talented people come in later, which carried a lot of that show to the end. And these are Harvard guys that are just brilliant, and so I would say, Jerry certainly did more, and we cut the stand-up out to allow that. And Andy Ackerman, very laid back, chill, let them kind of just do their thing. So yeah, it morphed and changed, but I think pretty much everything does in some form.
Yeah, sure. we had Mandel on. He was funny. He was actually very critical of many of his episodes that he wrote, but it was kind of refreshing to see. The Lee Garlington, Morty, the original Frank. Whose decisions were those? Was that kind of a group effort? Like this just doesn't fit, or we need to recast this. I always wondered about that, specifically those three, just because those are Lee Garlington. Obviously, just moved away from the waitress, and obviously Julia was, Julia. But Morty and Frank actually replaced. What kind of goes into that, if you can give any insight there?
Larry and Jerry have an instinct where, if you've watched Jerry, he hears anything remotely funny, he not only grins, he bursts into laughter. He's searching for it to find the funny in everything. And I think with those guys is they might have worked great on other shows. If it isn't literally what was kind of in their head, or better than what was in their head and embellished what they did, then they're looking to replace it and make it better. So we'd throw a set out because it was this, or he's rewritten entire scenes while we waited show night, and Larry has, and he's thrown entire episodes out. So if it isn't just right, and he'd look at it upside down and think he just wasn't afraid to make the change, he'd pull the punch. He fired George Steinbrenner. Everyone says like Steinbrenner decided he didn't want to do it. Like, that's a bunch of crap. He was awful.
He was awful. And you hired him essentially, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. And he hated the idea that we were, having George work at the Yankees. He was like, "Who is this?" And his family had to tell him, like, "Dad, it's a really popular show," and we couldn't license Yankee Stadium shots early on. So the shots you see, I think, are Mets Stadium, Shea, or some other stadium that I took the Yankee letters off in post and put them on another stadium because they would have no part of it. And then I snuck a camera into Yankee Stadium to shoot backplates for George's office. I had someone go in and so he just kind of shot. I think it's like a minute. If you'll notice, every shot that you see out there, there's a guy watering the field. He's watering the grass.
Every time.
That's all we got. I just waited, like, can we get sued for that? I don't know. We just did it. And we needed it, and we did it. And then it became popular, and suddenly, like, Dad, you should do it. And he did it. And I don't mean to say anything. He should stick to baseball. It was worse than...
He hosted SNL once. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't,
Mike and the Mad Dog a lot, too. He's had a personality, but I guess in front of the camera, yeah, it's not going to... But,
yeah.
Yeah, we love hearing these stories. This is incredible. I know you mentioned earlier, you have these anecdotes and things like that. I mean, just to, like you mentioned, like you did 600 hours or whatever, 600 shows and all this, your career speaks for itself. And it sounds like, and you'll tell us, but that nothing compared to the way Seinfeld did things, where Larry did things, the way that set was run, like you mentioned, like on the fly, Larry's rewriting episodes and just things like that. Like any other anecdotes you have that you can speak to that, where you wouldn't have seen this anywhere else, right? Like it's the two geniuses you're talking about, Larry and Jerry, and all the talented people around that are kind of bringing this thing together. Like you said, like, how are we going to make this work? We don't care if we get sued. We just got to get it done. We don't have a lot of time. Like, I love hearing those kind of stories. Because like you said, in this day and age, everything seems to get real polished and kind of watered down and litigated and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds like the Seinfeld set was, I wouldn't say a free for all because it's business, right? And you're getting things done, but it was just like you did things your way. Is there any other stories like that come to mind that maybe you wanted to share?
A couple of interesting things that people may or may not know. I don't know if they know this, but my wife and I designed the Seinfeld logo. And Jerry said, maybe something with a spotlight way back. And the first one was Seinfeld Chronicles. Then we dropped it, and it just became Spotlight. So maybe we'll do a circle and bigger S and so forth, literally at our breakfast table. And then Jerry's like, yeah, that's cool. And I said, what do you want to do for colors? And he put his feet up on the table, and he said, it was a Nike high top. How about this one? And it's like, great. So I literally went on. We couldn't go online at that point. Got that and went into the lab and did it. And season 2, what do you want to do this year? You want to leave it? No. He goes over, holds up another Nike, and then a purple one, and then so every year was a different one of Jerry's tennis shoe. I don't know if that's out there or not. I know people sell the T-shirts.
I know you created it.
Yeah, I know you created it.
Right.
And then no one knew that. Oh, Jerry knew it, but no one knew that. And then as the series wound down and syndication was looming, I get these formal letters from Castle Rock and Sony saying, will you sign this, that it was a work for hire agreement? And I was like, I'm not signing anything. I'm not signing it. So that's just kind of out there. Another interesting thing is, and this, I should save that for the last story, but when we finally said, that's it, we had our hugs, we did the show, I had to go cut the whole last couple seasons down for syndication, and everyone had left, and it was myself and like 2 PAs. And I thought, I'm just going to walk through every office, make sure everyone's taking their computers and everything. Everybody had cleared everything except in Larry's office. There are 2 things left: a Tony Gwynn signed bat, game used bat, to Jerry from Tony. And then I thought, I'll check the closet. And I opened his closet, and there was a paper box, and I opened it, and it was full of spiral notebooks. And if you know anything about Larry, his entire life growing up to that, he'd have one here, and he'd man hands, slow talker, whatever. He'd notice little characteristics, and he'd write them down, and he saved them over the years. So it would be stand-up originally, and then many of those became many, many, many points for Seinfeld episodes. And I was like, wow, how could he leave this? So I called, and I said, I got these here. And Larry was like, you have what? I said, I have them here. Well, oh my gosh, can you have those sent to me? And I just shuddered to think of having that left there, because from what he told me, only about half of it was even touched. And much of it, I think, went into Curb after that. And I think, what is the value of that box that it almost got left behind? Like that was just crazy to me.
Wow.
Wow.
What about the Tony Gwynn bat? Did you get that back to him, or is that in your?
Uh, oh yeah,
Best hitter best hitter I ever saw. I mean,
Struck
pure
out
hitter.
like 20 times in his whole career or something crazy. Look at
Yeah,
his stats.
yeah.
The guy never struck out. It's insane.
yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Wow, that's incredible. So you were doing editing for syndication. The whole was there ever a time? I'm assuming, was there ever a time during the run that you thought about leaving, or obviously your buddy Sharonis left. All these guys were kind of going doing other things. I'm sure offers came your way. Was there ever a point where you said this is enough, or you just loved it and you wanted to see it through?
I loved it, and it was, the success to me is when you wake up and you think, is it Saturday? And you think, oh no, it's Monday. But oh yeah, I have that today, or we're doing this today, or we're shooting that today, and it's wanting to go to work and loving your job, and I never wanted it to end. I mean, it was a family and just challenging, really challenging, but fun. Unlike anything else I've ever done.
And I'm making an assumption here, but was that from your childhood, being on the Mr. Rogers set? Like, did you bring any of that or any of those anecdotes, knowing Fred, to Larry and Jerry? I always thought about that.
I don't know if they even know that I knew him. I think, Fred as a person was probably the most humble, lovely man you'd ever meet in your life. And what you see is exactly what you get. There's no persona. There's no, I'd literally walk on a set and they were shooting an episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood at 7. And he'd say, well, cut, stop. And he'd walk over, sit down. How are you today? You know what we're doing here? And he'd give me some life lesson, like therapy. It was almost like I got therapy as a 7-year-old. And you left feeling like 10 times, 100 times better than you did having not met him. And later he would come to our house for Christmas parties, and he'd always search me out and remember everything we had talked about before. And so I think if I took anything on, it's like, just be a good person. Leave everything better than you found it. Which I think we did a pretty good job with that series. I'm looking at your background in Monks. I don't know if anyone's ever told you, but that board back there has a menu. But for many years, it was the most foul menu that you could imagine. Think of like the nastiest
right. Because it would never really, it never really got on camera. So you guys just.
It was too far back, and don't have the egg salad.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, obviously everything you just said, it rings true, and just it's great to hear, and we ditto is what I want to say. But I would want to ask though, like, what would be do you remember like a challenging episode, or like, something that you think maybe didn't come together, or what was like the hardest, like kind of one of the episodes you were working on something behind the scenes, or even just you noticed, from just the rest of the crew and cast working on that, didn't come together fully, or like, oh, I wish I had that one back, or was there any moments of like that sort of, where it was like challenging and maybe you wish you had it back sort of thing? I'm just curious if there was anything there where you, or just always kind of landed the way you wanted it to.
I don't remember the name of the episode. Kramer gets thrown in the Hudson River, I think, in a bag. And we're like, how are we going to do that? And then he's swimming. And it's like, are we going to build a tank? We don't have time to take him anywhere. And we ended up going on location to Universal and doing a lot of that. Ended up looking pretty decent. But if you look closely, you can tell some of it's cut with green screen. And it's like, really, we used the best technology they had at the time, and it's like, right. So I couldn't have that one back, but doing it now, it would be like, like you're in the river with them, right. And a lot of that blue screen stuff limited only by technology in the day. I think one thing, I just thought of another interesting thing that at the end of the filming, some friends and family could come down and hugs and everything, and then we'd push him away so we could finish shooting. And after that, at some point, one of the crew members' brothers came down and put a couple of postcards on Jerry's refrigerator that was his original art, and waited for syndication, so we couldn't change it, and then sued Castle Rock for a big bag of money. That, hey, they used my stuff, and it's like, you put it there. Well, can you prove it? No, I didn't put it there. Those type of things went on all the time. Like, someone put a picture of Albert Einstein on for one episode, and I think we paid $400,000 or something like that. Because there's a bunch of public domain, but only one that they own, or two that the family owns. So a lot of little weird behind the scenes kind of things.
Wow. Yeah, you don't think of those things, I guess, right? You brought it up, so we might as well ask. I know we usually try and stay in our lanes, but what's the Alec Baldwin story that you could you share that with us, or is that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's from a different episode. It was from Will and Grace, but
right.
We were paying him a lot of money to come in and just do a couple of episodes, and he wanted to do more, and the needle didn't even move on the ratings at all. So I asked NBC, and I knew the answer was like, absolutely not. So I sent an email to our casting director saying, not going to happen, doesn't move the needle, not going to happen, please let him know. And she sends it to Alec's agent, and the agent shares it with Alec. And I know him. He's been in probably 15 episodes of Will and Grace. He called me, and my wife and I were out at dinner. I picked up the phone, and it just tore my ear off. Just absolutely said, and he had one more to do. I had to face him coming up in 2 weeks. And he said, I just hope I catch you in a hallway alone with you. And I can't say the rest of the stuff. And then after a while, I was like, I might just want to do that as long as there's a couple of cameras in that hallway. Like, you know what I mean? That might be kind of cool. But
Babu would never do that. You know what I mean?
Say, no one, John O'Hurley never did that, I'm sure, either.
Never.
But it sounds like you were a lot more involved with, I mean, in casting. Did Hirschfeld kind of just own that from soup to nuts on Seinfeld? Or did you kind of get it all there to get some, like...
No, Mark was genius. He'd bring in an assortment. You want a choice, but I think within that choice, he knew that person's perfect. That guy's putty, but he'll bring in 4 putties. And, Larry and Jerry would notice it right away. And they went in knowing he wrote it. It's in their head, and they have to find that person in that inflection. And when they find it, they find it. And it's what makes it so wonderful. On other shows, you bring in 20 people, and they all leave, and they all sound the same to most people, and it's chaos. And you just, all right, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and it's wrong, and it's not as funny because of it. Their expertise in choosing that, writing it, choosing it, and putting it on the screen is like, that's why it's Seinfeld.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I was watching some clips that you were featured on. Was the non-fat yogurt one of our favorite episodes? And obviously that was kind of a tricky one, right? You literally filmed that a night before it aired because Giuliani just won, and you had to film Phil Morris as Dinkins' guy. Any other examples like that where it was kind of just up to the last second and you had to kind of film different things and it was chaos? And obviously we were sitting on our couch on Thursday, we wouldn't know, but any other stories like that, like the non-fat yogurt, where it was really you were really under the gun, if you will?
I think not an abnormally amount under the gun. With that particular episode, we went in knowing that, do you think we can pull this off? We'll get the early election results. Maybe we'll cut it both ways. But we wanted the real material, so it went back and forth. But we were prepared to, I think on the East Coast, we satellited from Burbank to make that air. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. Normally, you submit it, they make tapes, it's shipped, you never satellite due to quality. The other one, I think you talked to Jeff Yerkes about, Jerry generally doesn't watch the whole cut till very close till it airs. He'll see it through the process, but Larry was in there just grinding most of the time, and he came in, wait a minute, this is the wrong stand-up. And I'm looking at it thinking, it really doesn't have anything to do either way, but to him it did. So it's got a switch. And I was like, it airs tonight. We'll make it happen. And so we just slammed that thing. I drove my car over to NBC, double parked in the street, and ran past the guard, which you could never do today without getting shot, up the stairs to master control. They usually look at it 4 times before they would air something. They literally put it on the machine, and it aired 3 minutes later. And they were just dying. I mean, they had nothing to air on prime time. And I thought, I could have put an X-rated movie in their hands, and that would have aired. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been the Tim Show. And it's like that's as close as I've ever cut anything in my life professionally on anything. I mean, I was drenched, and my heart was bursting out of my chest, and thinking, like, if I don't get there, I'm just absolutely screwed.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a sign of the times too, like you said, having to do all that manual, heavy lifting manually and all that kind of stuff, with the tape, running it, by hand and everything else, up to the last minute. I would love to get your thoughts on a couple of two points that I think a lot of Seinfeld fans kind of debate, kind of thing. And you were there, firsthand, and obviously you have your thoughts. One is the killing off of Susan, and 2 is the finale. A lot of debate around both of those in Seinfeld circles. I'm wondering what it was like, in that you were in there, right? You were in the heart of it. Like, what was the interior, debate between writers, producers, crew? Was everyone on board? This is the way to go with Susan? Was everyone on board? I mean, the finale, we like the finale. I think it gets a bad rap. I think it's more like, the Super Bowl where people just watch the Super Bowl and then watch the whole football season and they think, what happened here, right? If you were watching the series the whole way, I think it ended well. But, everyone has their thoughts. I'm curious inside the circles there, or even just your own personal opinion on a couple of those things with killing Susan and the finale.
I can't speak to what Larry and Jerry thought. I think no one really, just in a general sense, among the writers, producers, staff, thought Susan was particularly strong. Nothing personally, but I thought that's the one real miss we had over the years in casting. Especially, it's a reoccurring thing. I know Jason was not happy at all. It was like acting with a cardboard box. It was like nothing. He got nothing back. And he's been, I think, pretty vocal about that. So I think it reached a point where enough's enough, is my opinion on that. And it was like, the way she died, I don't know, that's debatable. Again, wouldn't have been my choice, but it was a choice.
Right.
The finale, I think I agree with you. I think it got a bad rap. I think to shoot what we shot in the amount of time we had with that many people and have it not leak out what it was. I mean, we had helicopters circling above our soundstage with cameras and people trying to sneak cameras in, and fake delivery guys trying to come in and just, they'd get a glimpse of somebody and then a story would come out. So we had to build curtains from the dressing rooms and tunnels and only give certain pages to certain people. So, most of those actors, almost everybody, including some of our main cast, didn't fully know the story until they shot the end, which was pretty amazing. But I think, if you look at it, I love those guys, and America loves them. But if you really look at them, they're not very nice people. They're greedy. They're out for themselves. They're liars. And I think Larry, my impression of that was, he wanted to showcase that. They go to jail, they pay a pittance for it, and even down to making fun of a fat guy, and
they're relatable, Tim. I mean, that's the key. Like,
yeah.
And I think it's interesting. I forgot who we spoke to, but it's like George character. I think he's, in my opinion, the greatest TV character of all time, because he's relatable to me when I was 11, and he's relatable to me now. If that, the old Charlie Brown reference, like. I mean, that to develop a character like that is just pure genius. And the Susan part, well, listen, if Susan didn't come back, we wouldn't get I believe that was your only on-air appearance, right, in the engagement?
I had 2. And was turned down a whole bunch of others. Again, I'm a behind-the-camera guy.
Yeah, we wanted it because we've seen Wayne Cannon, all these guys hopping on. Oh, so you did turn down a few.
Yeah, I was like, I can't do that. Like carrying luggage in for one of those, so I was going to be I don't know what it was, limo driver or something that carries the luggage in, and just popped in, but we were out shooting on the pier in Santa Monica when George sits on the bench and has the revelation.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was about trying to lure in seagulls, which we weren't supposed to do, so he could run through them and scatter them and pigeons or whatever it was. And then Larry and Andy said, we need him to look over and see a couple kissing. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I'm married. There's an extra. I don't really want to kiss her on national TV. Well, just put your arm around her and let's look like this, So he's looking around to one thing, and I'm one of those thoughts in that piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to do it.
Speaking of on-air roles, one thing that Sack Lunch, right?
Yeah.
The movie. Well, that's me and my family on the movie poster, and
Really?
they're selling T-shirts everywhere. And I get a call from Tom Azzari, or
Set director, yeah.
set director, yeah, and production designer, and he said, "I'm in a pickle. Larry's decided it needs to be this family trapped in a lunch sack, and you're the only family that has actual kids. Can you do it?" And we had friends in from out of town, so I said, "Sure." So I went out to the garage, put a bicycle helmet on one of my kids, and my buddy, I said, "Here, take my picture. What's this from?" He said, "Don't worry about it. It's for the show." And we took a bunch of those, and it becomes. I have the poster framed in my basement.
Oh,
that was a kick.
That is
my kids had no idea.
Yeah.
They didn't have. I think they just found out a couple of years ago. I had kind of forgotten about it. But
I love
That's
everything about that story. I love the fact that Larry's thinking about the movie poster of the fake movie Sack Lunch. Just that.
oh yeah,
It's your family. I mean,
Oh man,
Man.
Incredible! More importantly for our audience, Tim, you were the leading rusher for 2 years at Westminster College. Is that correct?
it is. It is.
We always you could tell you're a sports guy, obviously a football player, Pittsburgh guy, the whole thing. I love Seinfeld wove sports in all the time, which and another reason we loved it. Who's your all-time favorite Pittsburgh guy?
Oh, Clemente.
That's it.
Well, I'm on the board at the Clemente Museum in town, and I spend hours and hours a week just supporting that place and beginning outreach projects, and yeah, it's fantastic. But Clemente, I was there for his 3,000th hit, and went to Cooperstown. Yeah, I went to Cooperstown when it was inducted, and fanatic, you could put it in that terms. But yeah, I'm a Pittsburgh sports guy through and through.
You must have enjoyed all the baseball. And obviously, Larry's a huge fan. I'm guessing you guys would shoot the shit and talk baseball a lot.
A lot. I mean, Yankee fan for Larry and Jerry's Mets. And I think they overheard, one of our accountants was a football player as well. And Jerry and Larry heard one day that, hey, so you guys played college football. Yeah. So you think you're pretty fast. Yeah, you take us on. Jerry and I are going to take you on. Larry and Jerry versus you and your buddy there. I'm thinking, what if he gets hurt? I'm going to be the guy, and I'm thinking I was really fast. I'm going to smoke this guy. Do I let him catch it? Do I not? We get out in the little area there, and the whole staff gathers around. Now I'm like, oh, crap. Do I play full or do I back off? And Larry blows right past me. He looks much older than he is. And back then I'm thinking, well, he's bald, he's older. I'm going to smoke him. Now, just for the record, I'm faster and was faster, but I had to giddy up just to stay up with him. And we played till 10. Jerry, fast, great hands. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think that, but they're athletes.
wow, that's an incredible story too. It's like Jerry running the race against Duncan, right? Where
Yeah.
I
And
shoot
golfing,
yeah. But he did it
with Larry is an entire thing of itself, by the way. He's about his game, and oh yeah, you three are playing. It's a whole nother thing, and it's fun.
That's
He
awesome.
tees off. He'll tee off and just start walking, and it's like, wait a minute, I need to tee off, and he hasn't teed off. So then you wait till he's out of range, and then you tee off. And he'd hit his next shot onto the green, go up and putt, being closest to. No etiquette at all. And then he'd walk to the next tee before you're even finished putting. It's like the craziest thing. That's just the way he played.
right.
Tim, My partner has no golf etiquette either, so I'm with you. I am glad that title of the story was great. I mean, could you imagine? Yeah, you pulled out a Shrix-on or something. So that certainly. Tim, this has been great. We can't thank you for spending some time with us tonight. And just thank you so much. Obviously, you were there from beginning to end, and you clearly made a huge impact, and you're still making a huge impact. So we appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It was a great meeting you guys and doing this.
Thank you, Tim.
Since you're editing, I'll throw in one more story if I've two more. One you might not be able to air. We went on Christmas break and came back for a table read, and we're sitting around the table, forget what episode, and just smelling like 10 dead rats in there. And we scour the whole stage and discovered that someone takes a dump in Jerry's toilet in his fake bathroom. And the toilet isn't, you can lift it up. It's not even attached. It's just sitting on loose site. And then suddenly Larry gets up, walking around like, what the heck? And they kind of storm off, and it became a big thing. And only the people there knew it. And it was just like, who would have done this? So I'm trying to roll back cameras and stuff. We didn't have a lot of that in those days. I'm trying to find out who the masked pooper was. That was like the whole thing. And what was the other story? And the other story is when we wrapped, I thought, we better be careful. People are going to come in and loot. They're going to want their memorabilia, right? And 2 hours before I could get a guard down there, a group of writers came from Sybil. Sybil Shepherd had a show, Sybil.
Yeah.
They came over, stole all the cereal, oven mitts, all kind of stuff from his kitchen, and someone ripped the intercom that we used through the entire run of the show out of the wall and left a hole, right? And took it. And word got back to Jerry. Jerry went over himself and walked into their writing room and said he wants every single thing returned. How dare them? And like, we're boom, no, that's my house. And I always thought, how cool is that? He could have sent security, could have sent me, anybody. Yeah. He was like, no, that he had to let them know, like, you don't do that. You don't come into my house.
Wow.
And the set was going to, I think, to the Smithsonian at that point, at least in the discussions. But
so did you ever get the pooper or not?
The dump.
We didn't get it. It's so discouraging. We went through, like, I had a Cuban cigar guy who'd come and he'd open the zipper thing and boxes all out, and then Jerry, I'd call him and he'd come in and take that one, take that one, take that one, and he'd say, pick one for yourself. And these are like $1,200 boxes of cigars. I'm 26. I was like, yes, he'll be back next month, and we're doing all this. So I set up my humidor in my office, and I keep going in thinking, someone's taking my cigars. So back then, this just had started. I hired a spy guy to come and hide a camera in my clock radio. And I'd come in each day like, did I catch a mouse, right? And I'd sit and sign checks and have it on fast forward on the TV. And you'd see the sun coming up, you see the maid coming in with her cleaning lady with her vacuum. And 1 day, 2 days, finally I see some movement. I was like, whoa, 2 security guys in full security uniform from the lot, gloves on, walk over, open up, sniffing my cigars, steal that, and my lighter at the time. So I have it on tape. And so I call the writers, and Jerry's like, this is the greatest day of my life. They came down, like almost made popcorn to watch this tape. We watch it. They're freaking out. He laughed his butt off. And then I called the head of the lot, and I said, we have a problem here. Like, you need to come watch this. And so full restitution. They replaced the cigars, but crazy stuff like that all the time. I did catch them, but we didn't catch the pooper.
What? We'll do our best. We'll try to get out of him one of these days.
Yeah, it just reminded me of Larry Charles in the airplane episode when he comes out of the bathroom, wondering if it was Larry Charles in that toilet.
Oh, that wasn't that fantastic?
Elaine goes in after him.
That's one of the biggest times. I've never laughed any harder than that when he comes out just with that beard. Did anyone ever tell you about Larry Charles, his office?
No.
It's a little teeny office, 15 by 15, desk, lamp, computer. But every draft of every script that he would get, he would never throw out or recycle. He'd throw it on the floor. So it was literally that deep from wall to wall in his office. So you'd open the door. There was just enough to open the door. And then you'd have to like step up 1.5 feet and then walk over the scripts to sit down on the couch to talk to him, and then your knees were like up on your chin,
Wow, those scripts.
and you'd
those
be like,
scripts-
"What's that about, dude?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I don't know." Just kind of thought it was cool, you know. That was Larry.
And he was
Wow.
funny. Wow.
Oh, he was the funniest.
Well, this is like I said, Tim. Thanks for the extra time, and
Yeah. So thank you so much.
appreciate
Yeah,
it so much.
absolutely.
This was great.
This was amazing.
Well, thanks for carrying the torch. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tim.
Have a
All
great
right,
night,
guys.
Tim. Thank you.
You do.